Hey y'all, give me 1 second. I need to roll up some windows. Okay, I'm back. Hi everybody, welcome. This is bound to be the most interesting virtual interim for me to do because I'm having internet issues, and so I'm hotspotting my laptop in my car, and also I don't think Lou's joining, which means I have to jump back and forth between screen share and starting show of hand polls. But in any case, welcome. This is the second virtual interim on the topic of templates. Lou Berger will not be joining me today, and I don't know if our secretary is joining either. I don't see him yet. As always, there's a note. Well, I'm not supposed to interpret the meaning of it, but generally speaking, everyone knows that what you say here on this call is being recorded and is considered a contribution to the IETF. There's also the note really well, which is to say, um, generally speaking, this is a professional meeting and we all are going to conduct ourselves professionally. The session is being recorded. Um, Please help take notes if you can, but I don't think it's truly necessary because honestly, for this call, the record of all the show of hands polls, that is the minutes. So probably additional minutes on top of that are just not necessary. Agenda bashing. So this interim is to review the remaining requirements, starting with requirement number 10. So last time we made it to requirement number 9, and since then I added one more requirement. Um, so I think there's a total of 8 requirements that we need to go through. And lastly, to discuss possible next steps for how to publish an RFC. Would anybody like to add agenda item? Yeah, Jason, please go ahead.
Jason Stern, Nokia. Not exactly agenda item, but just a heads up, Kent. I couldn't find where we actually had an issue to track precedence rules, so I added 2 of them just this morning.
Oh,
If they
okay.
end up being dupes, fine, but we'll see when we go through.
Okay, great. Yeah, and also everybody, um, please let's not do the whole queue thing. It's very difficult for me to monitor the queue. Just simply put on your microphone and speak, and we'll do it that way. Okay, so I'm going to stop screen sharing the slides and start to screen share the issue tracking. Okay, so just to confirm, can people see the GitHub issue tracker now?
Yes.
Perfect. Nice. Okay, so last time we made it to requirement number 9. And so we have, I see, yeah, Jason added 2 more requirements, and then number 18 is the one I added, I just mentioned. So it looks like we have 11 more requirements to go through. And okay, so starting with number 10. for living. Oh, and by the way, for those who were not, part of the first interim on templates, what we're doing is for each of the requirements, we bring it up on the screen, we talk about it, and then we do a show of hand polls, which is effectively, do you support or not support the requirement? This requirement, number 10, for living templates, the configuration with both unexpanded and expanded templates is able to be returned. Okay, so maybe the requirement is not concrete enough. So definitely, I think living templates need to be returned from running. And to the extent that they're being returned from intended is maybe subject to discussion, but I definitely think the flattened or expanded impact of the templates are visible in intended. So maybe we need to wordsmith the requirement just a little bit. But
Hey, Kent,
yep.
just heads up. This one actually is very overlaps a lot with a number of other ones that have been broken down in a much more granular way. So there's requirements 12, 13, and 15, which are much more explicit. The running contains unexpanded, the intended. So I wonder if we should maybe, I don't know if you want to jump to those, but it seems like this number 10 is kind of a little bit generic, whereas 12, 13, and 15 have kind of broken it down to very specific statements about which data stores contain expanded and unexpanded. I would recommend we actually just jump to 12, 13, and 15 and then come back to 10 to see if there's anything missing about where unexpanded and expanded templates should be shown.
Yeah, okay. I think I agree with you. It's probably a superset, but let's go ahead and do the show of hands. I think, it's probably captured. Anyway, so here's a show of hands. Do we agree that the expanded and unexpanded templates should be returnable?
Okay, just never mind the data store, just saying somehow you should be able to see both expanded and unexpanded templates.
Yeah,
somehow.
somehow. Yeah, I assume
okay.
everybody's going to vote yes for this one because it's a given. And sorry for the infinite Zoom. Again, I don't have anyone else here to share the.
Just a point there. I commented that it is not only for living template; it is for all templates. What I mean by that is, it is not only for the templates that comes under modification, but any template, right?
What other template?
I think it will be covering more in detail in the upcoming requirements.
Well, what other template is there? I think we only are talking about living templates. There is a concept of a non-living template, set it once and it applies once, but this whole solution is not about that. So this whole solution is about the living templates. So do you still have a concern?
Robert Pesci speaking. What is a living template, maybe?
Somebody's keyboard is very loud. Can you go?
It's Jason.
Nice. Okay. Sorry, what was the last question?
So, Robert Pesci from Nokia, what is a living template? Just for my clarification, please.
Yeah, okay. So you're right. It's not well defined. We can call it a persistent template or a connected template. But basically, the idea is that the configuration and running is attached to a template. And if that template is being modified, then the modifications are automatically applied to whoever, the template consumers. So it's a persistent relationship between the template consumer and the template. And so that makes it a sort of a living or a persistent template. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, thanks.
Yep. Okay, well, the show of hands is, I think, complete. Mostly everyone is unanimous that we should be able to return expanded.
I added a clarification to the issue, Kent, just to be very explicit that it is only you may need to refresh. That is only about the ability to see the two, not where or how.
Gotcha. Yep. That must have been all the keyboard typing I heard before.
Yep.
Thank you. All right. So perfect. So let's move on to number 10, hopefully, oh, sorry, 11. Possibility to reorder some user-ordered list or leaf list entries defined by a template. Okay. I recall one of the presentations in IETF 121 had this feature, that the ability to move the ordered lists items inside a
Yeah, I
template.
think it was the same one that had the delete operator, whichever
Yeah.
presentation had. It had a bunch of operators.
Mm-hmm. And I think in the last interim, the delete operator it got the show of hands for it wasn't very strong. But anyway, so Shafan, I think you're here, right? This is yours. Can you say some more about it?
Yeah, yeah. So, yes, I'm wondering. Just one thought is that I'm considering maybe we can define the requirements which some feel complex as like features or capabilities that is option to implement, so that we can give some flexibilities to implementations and devices with extra energy can look into this. Just some thoughts from my side.
Well, can you speak to the importance of the problem?
Oh yeah, so for the reordering things, I think it's as I commented, I think it's a nice to have requirement. So you in some cases the ordering carries some meanings like the access control rules. So there might be a desire for the client to reorder some like rules. So I think it could be useful. Yeah.
Is it okay if I interject here for
Please.
a second? Jason Stern, Nokia. I agree that this might be an interesting kind of more advanced functionality. And, when we were first gathering requirements for this, right, I think everyone was encouraged to kind of brainstorm and put up all the ideas to make sure we have a super set of ideas to evaluate. But I guess I would, just in the spirit of what we saw in the first interim, I'm kind of feeling like there's a little bit of momentum around trying to keep the base spec fairly tight and simple. So although this might be an interesting idea, I'd propose it's one that, like the delete, is kind of like maybe for follow-up work or a follow-up RFC that would augment it or something. I'd kind of rather keep this spec more simple and tight, and including not even getting into all the details of specifying it now as an optional feature, like just leaving it aside for a base draft. That'd just be my feeling on it.
Yeah, we'll do the show of hands in 1 second. But last time's interim, the show of hands, I think there was 2 requirements that had effectively split opinions, and for those that were voting no, if I understand what the comments were, the reason why the voting was no was not so much because they were vehemently opposed to the idea, but because it was more like, let's not do it now. Which is, so the no category or the no vote has sort of a dual meaning. It's a little bit unclear. What does it really mean? And that's why it's subject to more discussion. But I think, yeah, so, okay, so let's do the show of hands here as well. For this one, I do understand it. All right. So
I was just going to make a similar comment. It's somewhat aligned to what Jason is saying. So I don't think this is a requirement, as I don't think we have to do this. But if this fell out of a solution, as in it was easy to do and it wasn't complicated, then that would be fine to me. But I wouldn't want us to go out our way to support this. So maybe it falls out and works automatically fine. But otherwise, I don't think that we should be investing time. That's just my thoughts.
Yep. Yeah, and my only, I think, closing comment would be for those that are if it's not that, if the intention is that we do it later, which is fine, we may want to enable the solution, like whatever the solution is, that it's easy to do it later. So maybe we'll take it into account anyway now, but not to do it now, but just to ensure that the solution that we come up with now doesn't preclude the ability to do it later. Okay, so I'm going to start the show of hand poll for this one, requirement number 11.
Just one other note on this. It's kind of a bit independent, but it feels like the feeling is maybe a no on this, but we will have to define what you actually do for user ordered things. I put a proposal in the end of that issue, but we'll have to have, if we don't have like a specific position operator, we'll just have to define, okay, well, templates add entries at the end of the list, etc.
Indeed, and definitely the solution will have to do that. And thank you for adding a note to the issue, so we can take that into account. All right. So it looks like, generally speaking, the votes are in, and this is not well supported at the moment. By the way, okay, I guess I'm seeing about. Okay, good. Okay, now I see. Yeah. Okay, very good. Never mind. I'm going to cancel that show of hands, and now moving on to number 12. All right, so the running data store contains the unexpanded template. This is not saying anything about whether it contains the expanded template, just that it contains the unexpanded template. I think this is almost the definition, right, of what we're trying to do. Of course, it's going to be there. I see some comments, and mostly from Robert Pesci and Jason Stern. So do you guys want to speak to this issue at all?
Robert Pesci speaking. Well, yes, I think that you told it quite clearly. I mean, that's the basic idea of a template. It is configured in the running data store, and yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, I think our comments were mostly just in support of the title.
All right. Show of hands for requirement number 12. Okay, excellent. It looks like unanimous support for this, which is expected. Next item, next requirement, number 13. The intended data store contains the expanded template. So, all right. I mean, maybe the word contains is a bit contentious. Meaning if you do like a get config on the intended, does it come automatically expanded, or is it like you have to pass a special flag to get the expanded template? In my mind, this is trying to say that you get it automatically, that like if you do a get config, you see the result is the expanded template.
You could say returns. The intended data store returns the expanded template by default.
Yes. Okay, nice. I'll do that. Returns the expanded template by default.
And then some of the debate below is kind of not directly related to the title, but I think there's debate below about whether the intended also returns the non-expanded templates. But I wonder if we should separate that into another new issue because it's a different statement.
It should be a different issue.
I
So
don't know if it is already. I don't think so.
can you do a quick scan, like on the
Yeah.
side?
I think
But
the related one,
I mean,
Deepak from Nokia, I think the related one is 15. We have something related to this.
Yes, you're right. Okay. Yep. 15 does.
I maybe wanted to add something on this. I agree that the intended data store returns the expanded template by default. I think that's normal, but I think also that my opinion that the template solution should be also working with non-NMDA Yang, and so here, how do we capture that?
You want to raise a separate requirement for it is probably the best way of capturing that.
right. Okay. So good
Is-
point. I don't think the template solution should be NMDA specific, right? I mean, it should be
Yes,
a possible for both NMDA and non-MDA. For non,
Yes, although
yeah.
some aspects may be available or better in NMDA cleaner.
Oh, absolutely, definitely. For non-NMDA, I'm guessing that there would have to be some special RPC or something like that.
yeah. So maybe we could have two separate requirements. One requirement would be this one telling that when an MDA is used, the intended data store returns the expanded template by default. Okay, that's I think the idea. And also another requirement that says that the template solution should be workable for non-NMDA and NMDA deployments. That would be my suggestion.
My only worry is I don't think we want to require that implementers implement the non-NMDA version of templates, because I think that's could be quite expensive.
Oh,
So
yeah.
A lot of vendors have a kind of an NMDA compliant implementation. I think there could be an option for a server to do a non-NMDA version,
okay.
but I think, not a requirement.
I get your point. You're right. So the idea would be that the template solution is applicable. I mean, you're not required. You just select what you want to deploy, but I think the requirement could be read as the template solution should be applicable to NMDA and non-NMDA, and you make your choice as a vendor or as an operator. You deploy one or the other. Would that work?
I think we need to be slightly careful here. So I think I agree, Robert, with your principle of trying to achieve that. But I think, again, it depends on what the impact of that is on the solution. So if that was to end up making the solution a lot more complex, then I would say, no, we do it with an NDA and make that requirement. If it could be carried without adding too much complexity to the solution, then fine. So if it's an extra parameter to like a get data request or get config request, then then that would be okay potentially.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, I think the NMDA solution's more elegant. On Juniper devices, which I'm familiar with, it's possible to ask the device, like, you show me the running with the inheritance flattened. So it's an extra parameter that's being passed into the effectively the get request, which allows for, but so you're not really targeting the intended data store, but you're asking the running data store to return with an inheritance flattened.
Okay, yeah. I was thinking also, and I think I made some comment there, that in non-NMDA deployment, of course, you must have a view one way or another of what has been expanded. So brute force would be just to foresee state data nodes that reflects what has been expanded. So that is a possibility. We don't need to go into that kind of details, I think, in the requirements. The requirement should be that in non-NMDA case, we must also be able to return the expanded template.
Sure. Okay. This particular requirement, though, is NMDA specific. I think I want to edit the title. I'll say for NMDA, right? The intended data store returns the expanded template. So if if the device is supporting NMDA, then the intended data store returns the expanded template by default. Okay.
That's
All right.
good. I mean,
Nice. All right. So let me start the show of hand poll.
So one moment, Ken, you've got that returns it by default. Isn't it just it returns the expanded template configuration? I'm not sure that by default should be in there. As in, I don't think intended should ever return the unexpanded configuration because that's going to violate 8342.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
yeah.
So we added the by default. That was Jason's idea, which I liked. But I mean, you're. I think what you're saying here is that it suggests that there's some way to get the intended data store, like it some other way, like I think it's a given. The intended data store
Well,
has
that's
the
kind of tied up with issue 15, right? Which says it does not contain the templates.
I
Is that
don't
what
think so.
is that what you mean,
Right.
Rob, or you're saying it should never contain non-expand? Like, I'm not sure if you mean it could contain the non-expanded templates or just the absence of the expansion.
No,
I think this issue is just saying that NMDA just says if the intended data store automatically has post template expansion configuration. That's what intended is defined as. So
Yeah.
I don't want to have anything here requirements or suggest that you can give intended a different flavor that doesn't have the post expanded because I think that would be a mistake. I would argue quite strongly against that, like an architectural mistake.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So I took away the by default. So now it simply says for NMDA, the intended data store returns the expanded template.
Mhm.
All right. All right. So let's do this. Show of hands, number 13.
So just also to make sure, that does not imply that the intended does not contain the template, does it?
That's issue 15.
Yeah, that's issue 15. We're getting there. Okay. Again, looks like unanimous support for this. Thank you. Moving on to next requirement, number 14.
Maybe just one comment there, Deepak from Nokia, about should we make it explicit that it could also be for non-NMDA, or is it implicitly we agree that it could also be for non-NMDA? I mean, since
the previous requirement was specifically said for NMDA. We may want to have another requirement that says for not NMDA.
Okay.
And we can then speak to that.
Okay.
If you want to add a requirement for that, we'll get to it in a moment.
Okay.
Okay, so this issue, number 14, off-box validation of running contains templates must be possible. Okay, so I mean, okay, so the idea here is that clients are going to have to be template aware, right? We're publishing a standard for how to do template resolution. Clients need to understand how to do that, to get the running configuration, including its template definitions, and themselves do the flattening or the expanding of the template locally in their own like local memory, and then be able to validate that result. So that's what we're talking about here.
I sort of I agree with what your sentiment is, but I'm not sure I entirely agree with the wording. So I definitely agree that we should be able to specify how the template expansion works, and a client off the box should be able to do that template expansion. The bit that I don't necessarily agree with is that it must be able to do off-box validation. It might be able to do that, but there obviously might be other things that feed in to change the configuration, like system configuration, etc., that means that you can't do the off-the-box validation. So the bit I'm rallying against slightly is saying that clients must be able to do off-the-box validation.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, so you're right. This intersects with system. The system configuration actually just the working group last call for it just closed. So it's going to be proceeding to ISG shortly. And you're right, with system, it also brings with it the need for clients to be aware, right? The clients need to be able to do not only template expansion, but also system resolution. So, getting the system data store and, being able to resolve their leaf refs that way. So there is a relationship between those, but I don't think that that's necessarily taking away from this particular requirement. It's part and parcel of the same thing.
But I just don't think I don't think the requirement is about validation. I think the requirement is about it must be possible for a client to be able to do template expansion, as in understand what the configuration would look like.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It may
Sure.
be that with that it can then do validation, but it may be it can't. It's just that I think that it's not that template expansion has to be done in the context of a server. It should be that that a client can also know how to do that template expansion.
The thing is, I wouldn't want to remove the concept of off-box validation completely from this issue, because at least maybe in the description say, we should probably just keep in there, for example, if off-box validation was desired, this may be a helpful property, something like that.
That's fine. Yeah.
I think I did it. Is that good? So off-box template expansion of running containing templates must be possible, enabling off-box validation.
I may have some issue with that. I mean, it should be possible, even when a template is not yet called upon, to validate what's in, because it should be possible that it should be impossible to make a template which is blatantly not okay.
But that was issue number 4, Robert. So
yep.
Like in the last call, we had issue number 4, which is about what validation we can do on templates, even like unapplied templates.
Yeah.
And I think everybody agreed with that one, that we want to at least do the whatever validation we can, which is mostly the syntax validation.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Fine.
Yeah.
So yeah. Sorry, guys. I agree.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, even myself, I originally I was not a fan of requirement number 4, but I came to see at least doing syntax level validation of requirement number 4 made sense. Yeah, so we have that. So this is number 14, and I'm about to start the show of hands for this. Any more comments?
Yeah, I still think it should be potentially enabling. I don't think it enables it, because certainly for our devices, we have a lot of rules for validating configuration that aren't available off the boxes, and you can't do it. But that's because those rules are not available, not because of template expansion.
Okay, so I added the word potentially. Potentially enabling off-box validation. I mean, it sort of saddens me to think that clients would not be able to actually do full, validation off-box. But there's, we're not saying it absolutely necessarily.
We should not knowingly break it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's fine. Yes.
Just asking, but why do we have the parentheses actually? Because actually the client does what he wants, so it does need to be configured to do that or not. Or do I miss some point here?
But sometimes some systems will validate the configuration against the hardware that's installed. So you wouldn't be allowed to configure a MAC address on a Sonnet interface, for example. Whereas other devices, it may be that's validated in a different way. So it just depends. And obviously, if you can't identify if it's a Sonnet interface or not in the configuration, you can't do that validation off the box because you don't know what the actual interface type is, as some example. So there's other things like that that's dependent on the hardware, that either you have to get the capabilities or the inventory information off the box to be able to validate against it, or you have to do the validation on the box or something similar.
I'm okay with the off-box. I think that's a good idea to have the off-box template expansion to validate. I was wondering what meant exactly enabling. What do we have to enable or not on the client? That I didn't. See, I'm asking. I'm trying just to clarify.
So my understanding is that from this issue is if you weren't able to do template expansion off the box and a client was using templates, then that would obviously preclude you from ever being able to do off the box validation because you wouldn't be able to do the template expansion. So as I can't remember, Jason sort of stated, we're just sort of saying we don't want to make the situation any worse through the use of templates. Does that clarify? Really.
Yeah, I think this issue fundamentally is just this. What it really comes down to is that we're publishing a standard. We're going to document how templates are expandable, and clients are able to follow that documentation and implement the code to expand the templates themselves. And it's necessary for them to expand the templates themselves if they wish to do off-box validation. So really, we're just saying, I think this requirement just basically says we're going to publish an RFC.
With enough details that a client could reproduce what a server does.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Perfect. All right, so I'm going to start the show of hand polls. Okay. Interestingly, someone keeps voting no opinion. I wonder who that is. All right, but otherwise, everyone's unanimous. That's good. And let's close that show of hand polls and get to the next issue. Number 15. All right, so the intended data store does not contain the template themselves. And let me preface this with a for NMDA, right? Because we're talking about the intended data store. So for NMDA, the intended data store does not contain the templates themselves. So here, actually, I've heard mixed opinions, right? I mean, some feel that the templates, as they were defined in running, should be present in intended, even though they've been expanded also, but they're still there in intended. I don't agree with that. I mean, this is my issue. I put this here, so I don't see the need for intended to also have the unexpanded templates. So anyway, any discussion?
Well, my opinion, but maybe wrong, but and then you correct me for sure. But the intended data store was to contain whatever was useful for the device to contemplate. And then if you take this point of view, of course, the template is something necessary for the device to contemplate and to use and to, for whatever purpose, for instance, expanding it. So,
okay. All right, nice. I really appreciate your saying that. Because there is a subtlety here, right? Like, I 100% agree with you that when running is being applied, that we want the servers to be able to be aware of what were the templates so they can optimize memory usage, right? I mean, they don't really, I mean, the servers themselves should be able to internally create data structures that mimic the templates and not so much the expanded version of the template. So that's true, but the point here is that when you do from a client's perspective, if you do a get config on intended, so it's not really so much what is the server doing internally, but from a client's perspective, if they do a get config on intended, it seems to me that it should be just a flattened template expansion.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, Kent. Jason Stern, like internally behind the scenes, it may make sense for an implementation to optimize and only have the kind of aggregated unexpanded template and just expand it as it returns the intended. that's a pretty valid implementation choice. The other thing that I clarified in just now in this issue is I think there's two types of templates people maybe want to keep in mind. One is what this spec is we're trying to define is a purely at the management layer, and that is your app layers don't know anything about these templates. The app layers only know about exploded views. And this is purely a management kind of layer function that's expanding the templates and downloading the expanded config to the app layer.
Mm-hmm.
There are also templates, and these are very heavily used, that are actually app layer templates, if not even all the way down the data path. An example is like a common example is a QoS policy or maybe a filter, where you have a QoS policy, you define 3 QoS policies that apply to like 10,000 interfaces, and you don't explode those out. Those go right down to your app layer, and your app layer knows about the 3 QoS policies. Those templates are what I'd call like app layer templates. Another example is BGP groups. Those were ones that they're not in the scope of this work, right? Those are ones that are, as far as the management layer is concerned, they don't get expanded. They just get carried through to the intended. They get delivered as templates to the app layer. So that's a different class, and those ones, sure, you would see those in intended, but those aren't, management layer templates that we're talking about here.
Correct. Yeah. So things like QoS and the like, those are just simply configuration, like, and they're not expanded. They're not templates in the sense of what we're talking about now, but they're constructs that behave a little bit like templates. So here, with intended, when I'm thinking about implementations, I don't actually think implementations will implement an intended data store, like in the sense of it being a persistent structure. I actually feel that intended is more of an ephemeral or conceptual thing, and so it doesn't actually exist in the server so much. I mean, it only exists in the moment of time where it needs to be expressed. So if a client is asking for intended, then the server does a just-in-time template expansion of running and hands them intended. But it's not really. I mean, it's up to implementations. But I mean,
Same with commit time.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah. All right. I think we discussed this good.
I was going to comment on this. So now, before we vote, so this is why I'm sort of mixed views on this. So I think in terms of my thoughts is I can see it both ways. I can see how the template itself is arguably maybe just configuration, and hence it would automatically appear in intended because it's just configuration, both expanded and unexpanded. But I could also see, depending, you had a template solution where that wasn't the case, that maybe you wouldn't see it. So I'm a bit ambivalent on this one. I think it would somewhat depend on the solution as to whether the template would automatically turn up in.
I agree.
Intended not.
So you want to make it implementation flexibility on this, Rob?
Well, I'm not sure it's implementation. I just think this is. I'm not sure this is a requirement for me that it must not contain them. I think this is an interesting design point that will come up during the design, and it will get fleshed out at that point. For me, it doesn't feel like this is a requirement. I think it's to do with what the design solution looks like.
Maybe the statement is a bit too strong. It's like 4 bits to put templates.
It's meant to be that way. So we had the earlier requirement that says that the intended data store will contain the expanded templates, and there's pretty solid support for that. So we already know the intended data store has the expanded. This is whether or not the intended data store also contains the unexpanded templates. So what I can add to this is, again, being a Juniper, familiar with Junos, there is this availability to request the device to show you the configuration with the templates expanded. And when you get that result, you do not get any of the unexpanded templates. Sorry, I'm literally on the
That's the
side of the
same
road.
with at least one of the Nokia
Yeah,
implementations.
yeah, and also I think we need to be this needs to be standardized. Like what the decision needs to be absolute, right? Like either we require intended to return the unexpanded templates or not. We can't be wishy-washy. We can't leave it to implementations to decide for themselves. It needs to be clear for interoperability reasons.
So I'm struggling because MDI defines template, defines intended as a conventional configuration data store. So conventional configuration data store share a common data store schema, and they allow copy configuration between among them. So if intended doesn't include the template is themselves, then it doesn't have to implement the template YARN module. So I'm not sure if this would go against with that definition.
Yeah, that's more. I also agree to that because if I configure a particular template, it is going to the configuration is going to be in the running, but then my intended, as per the definition, is a read-only copy of my running. So, I'm not pressing for this requirement as such, but then it automatically the template configuration becomes a part of the intended automatically, unless there is some construct which says no, I don't want this the configuration, I just want only the expanded part of the template.
Perhaps we should have further discussions on this kind of in the design stage.
Yeah, so I mean, Shifan made a good point about it's a configuration data store and the Yang for it would, it like the Yang for the templates to be in the intended data store would be there, right? It'd be valid from a Yang validation perspective for the templates to be in the intended. So that's true. I guess, and then so whether or not they are in the intended is all we're talking about. They serve no value in the intended, right? So if a client were to get intended, it's expanded because we had the earlier requirement that it's expanded, but they also see the unexpanded templates. But what would they do with the unexpanded templates? They serve no value at that point. I don't know. I mean, I guess I guess I'm myself unsure. It doesn't hurt. I guess there's no harm in returning the unexpanded templates in intended, but they also it's kind of pointless. And like why would we do it?
I mean,
I don't understand why we would do it.
One argument here is kind of going back to the IETF running code. I mean, there are many years of deployments on number of major implementations, and they don't return the unexpanded template. So, I mean, if we're going to lean one way, I would certainly not want to require it to return them. Whether we allow it to return them and have it flexibility, I don't know, but I'm a little more in line with Kent on this. That I'm kind of doubtful. I'm doubtful we should return them in there. Sure, the schema applies, but the instance data doesn't need to be presented. The other thing we should, just another example that I know we haven't standardized it yet, but think about inactivated config. So it's another feature that may eventually loom and is similar to these issues of system config and templates about differences between running and intended. Like there's a number of differences between the data in those two data stores. And I think that's okay.
Okay, so I heard so this requirement is a little bit different than others. It's a negative, right? It says does not contain. Maybe I can change this to a positive and say returns, right? So the intended data store returns the unexpanded template themselves. Now it's the positive. And so if you vote no, then it means either you vehemently oppose or it needs more discussion.
Sharing is stopped, or is that intentional? I don't see the screen.
Sorry, do you not see my screen?
Nope. Or is it only for me?
No, that's
people-
correct. The sharing has stopped.
Yeah, we don't see your screen, Kent.
It stopped a few minutes ago.
Okay, yep, thank you. Let me do that again. I see, yeah. Okay, do you see now?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so I changed the title. For an MDA, the intended data store returns the unexpanded templates themselves. Is that clear?
I prefer this one indeed, yes.
The word themselves, I know what you're getting at. I'm just worried it creates.
Okay, maybe remove the word themselves. Like,
Yes.
Yeah, okay, fine. Yep, I agree. Thank you. All right, so let's do this one. I'll start the show of hands. I actually already had it ready.
So if we think that more discussion is needed, are you saying we should vote no?
Yes.
Fine.
All right, so I think we have all the votes, or at least the total number. It looks like 8, which is pretty much the total number that we've been getting for the other requirements. Show of hands. 2 people voted yes, meaning that they definitely want the intended data store to return the unexpanded templates. Is that correct for the 2 people that voted yes? Is that what you mean?
Yes, that is what I meant. Yes. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. All right. So, so there's a leaning, but it's not unanimous, and probably needs a little bit more discussion. All right, so let's move to the next requirement.
So wait a minute. Leaning towards what?
So there, mostly everyone voted no, right? There's only 2 that so it was how can I say, 80% voted no and 20% voted yes, meaning that 20% thought that the intended data store should return the unexpanded templates themselves.
So I voted no. I read this as if the question is it must return the unexpanded template, then I don't think that's true. If it may return the unexpanded template, yes, certainly that's possible. Yeah, if it may not return the unexpanded template, then yes, that's also possible. I'm worried about the interpretation of this poll, meaning that we're against this requirement, whereas actually I think really there needs to be a clear comment that it just means there needs to be more discussion here, or this isn't a requirement, or something like that.
Yeah, so this one falls into the category of needing more discussion.
Okay, brilliant.
Because I think Jason made a really good point about there's actual running code. Servers are doing a certain thing. We don't want to force them to have to do anything different than what they're doing already. So we just need to be mindful of that. Okay, next one, number 16. I did not myself create this issue, but it says common data nodes. Every data node must be templatable while avoiding duplication copying of data tree. Every template consumer and corresponding template from which data is inherited must be able to use commonly defined data nodes. I don't know if I understand this.
Well, okay, that was for me. What I mean is, if a template, if there is a multiple template consumers inheriting data schema from a template, what I mean is the nodes must not be duplicated under each place in the data tree. If there are multiple consumers, I don't want the data node in the schema tree to be duplicated.
I'm sorry. Can you give a concrete example? I'm still not following.
Okay. Let's say I have the interfaces model, right? The list of there could be multiple lists, right? And a template consumer could have the list in its own place in the data tree, as well as it could have a different place in the template itself. So what I'm saying is uh, uh, this must not be duplicated. It can be a common data node which is used both at a template consumer as well as a template itself. Am I clear, or is it?
I'm not sure if I'm clear yet. Is anyone else?
Is this about maybe not avoiding having the Yang model show those nodes twice?
Not. It is not about showing the node. It is about
In the model.
In the model itself. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. What I meant was, is this about avoiding a Yang data model that has a node twice in the data model?
No, not exactly. What I'm saying is, if there is a, let's say, if I'm talking about mounted models, right? Then we talk about the same model being used by a template consumer as well as a template. So what I mean to say is, instead of let's say duplicating it, we could always use groupings.
So I think the idea is that
groupings is duplicating it. So if we use groupings, then the Yang model has it twice.
Let me maybe clarify my understanding about this. The templates and the template consumer basically manipulate the same data nodes. The template is a sort of model, like a sculptor needs a model to make statues. It contains the data node that you want to replicate. And when you define the template consumer, you may want sometimes to overrule this template data node for specific tuning. But basically, at the end of the day, what you have is that the template and the template consumer, they contemplate the same data nodes. And I think, if I understand, the idea of this requirement is that we should not copy these data nodes explicitly one by one in both the template schema and the template consumer schema. Is that clear like that?
That's correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
It seems a little bit related to issue number 3 we discussed last time, which is that templates must just kind of work with any Yang module, implicitly meaning without changing or touching that Yang module.
Yes, it is related, but there's a subtle difference there. Of course, any data node must be templatable. At the same time, we also need to ensure that it is not finding a different place in the tree. I mean, both the template and the template consumer, they typically work on the same node, right? And if we talk about the overriding of us of certain values, then by the template consumer, then we are essentially talking about the same node.
I don't think, Kent, if you're going to speak, but or I can speak to this one. I'm struggling here is to see if this is actually really a requirement or this is sort of too tied to potential implementation. So similar to what Jason was saying, I can imagine a lot of solutions here might do this in like metadata or solve it in a way where it doesn't affect an existing schema at all. It would work with any data nodes. That's fine. I can imagine there's other solutions that have been presented where you effectively have some scheme of embedding a template into the way you design Yang models. And then this might be more applicable to that, but I'm not sure that's a solution space that necessarily people want to go into at the moment. So I worry about this requirement as in I'm not sure how I can answer it other than I think this is not a requirement, or it requires a lot more discussion and explanation as to exactly what it is for it to be voted on as a requirement.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I mean, requirement number 3, and also the whole discussion about precedence, right? You know, that the template might define some data node, but then also the local configuration is defining the same data node, and so the local configuration has precedence over the inherited template value. I think this ties into that as well. You know, honestly, I think I want to close this issue. I don't think we should vote on it. Does anyone oppose me closing the issue?
Well, we could avoid voting on it for now and let the the author of it come back with follow up to try to clarify it. I guess
I'm going to close the issue, and the author can file a new issue if they like to.
okay.
Not a
So
problem.
maybe
Okay.
it's related, and I don't know if there's an issue, but do we? I think at some point we need to talk about whether implementers have a Yang model for their templates or cannot have a Yang model, or is that implicit in what we decided for number 3?
So,
Because like I know
I
several major implementations do publish a Yang model that includes the templates. They basically double their schema in what they publish. But I know there's been discussion that maybe that's not the way we'd want the standard to work. So I don't know if there's an issue that captures that exactly.
So I think there is an issue that we don't want a doubling of Yang schema. The idea is that this solution would be cross-cutting. Like it just the Yang itself doesn't necessarily so again, speaking about Juniper devices, I apologize, but they have a leaf called apply groups, and you know that leaf exists everywhere. Like every container in the tree contains the leaf apply group. So you know, so if you were to have Yang that were to describe the running configuration, it would have to presumably have in it under every single
No,
container
Junos
a
can't. So
leaf.
Junos does. Junos repeats the whole schema under the configure groups tree.
Yeah.
So does Nokia.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'm okay. Well, what I was gonna say, I mean, that's not ideal, right?
Yeah, I'm not saying it's the way we want to do it. I'm just
yeah.
wondering if we need an issue for it.
Yeah.
Maybe we can reconsider this when it's more clear what the template solution crystallize a bit in how it would work. Maybe it's a bit premature to discuss that kind of stuff here. Maybe.
Well, I could raise an issue just to say, do we allow a schema to be published for the templates or something like that?
I thought there was an issue. Wasn't it one
Well,
of the
three is the closest.
What about 4? I thought 4 was that templates have to be validatable. So how are they validatable if you don't have a schema?
Well, that one is because the client knows how templates work, right? So that's clients inherently knowing how our template spec works. So they don't necessarily need a published Yang schema under configure groups.
Okay, so on screen we have number 17, but actually I think we're still talking about 16. Let me go back to 16.
Yeah, or actually, indeed, we're discussing now. Yes.
Yeah. I think we're all trying to say the same thing, so that's the good news. Okay, so we'll get there. All right, so let's try to do number 17. The operational data store does not include pre-expanded template config or unexpanded template. So
I raised this. It's kind of a corollary of 15, I guess. So
well, I mean, 100%, right? I mean, why would operational want to be even aware of the fact that there were templates were being used, right? I mean, it's kind of, I mean, well,
Yeah,
I mean,
I was just trying to complete the discussion about where they show up in data stores.
no, it's good. I'm glad you put the issue. I'm just thinking, can anyone come up with a reason for why operational should be able to return the unexpanded templates?
Yes, I can. So I think again, it all depends on what is meant by applying a template. So logically, operational shows you what the configurations apply to the system, and expanding a template or applying that template is logically the act of how you apply that configuration, applying the template. So I'm not saying they should definitely turn up in operational, but I'm also not saying necessarily that they definitely shouldn't turn up in operational. That if the template is there in running and if it carries through into intended, then you might see that template in operational, as in this is the template that's been applied. This is what the template that's currently running at the moment is.
I mean, if we think the same answer applies for intended and operational in this, we could just merge 15 and 17 and say the intended and operational data store returns the unexpanded templates. Like, I think it's probably reasonable to tie them together. I find it hard to imagine we'd make different decisions for intended versus operational on this.
So I half agree with you, Jason. So definitely, if they weren't an intended, then they're definitely not an operational in my head. As in, they wouldn't disappear and reappear. If they were an intended, would they definitely be an operational? I'm not sure that that's a given.
Okay, I agree with you.
I just think this one again. I'm not sure this to me fits into the sort of the requirement category, or it's a property of the solution space. And maybe I think we just need to evaluate that and think, okay, so I think it's like this is an interesting property to evaluate solutions on, and some might have this property and some might not, and we may think this is a good or a bad thing, but I don't know if it's a requirement that they must not include it, which is how I read it does not include.
Okay. Yeah. So
Sure.
before I noted that we had a negative in the requirement, and I converted it to a positive so that we could do that. So how about the operational data store returns or how about unexpanded template configuration? And I put in a comment, but I'll say it depends on number 15. Is that sufficient for doing a show of hands?
I don't know. I mean, it's like a completely different requirement though. So what?
Yeah.
So
what's 15 again?
15 was for NMDA, the intended data store returns the unexpanded template. So, like, so first 15 is whether or not the unexpanded templates are intended, and then this one 17 is whether or not the unexpanded templates are in operational. And of course, you would have to have them unexpanded and intended if you're going to have them unexpanded and operational. So there's a dependency between the two.
I'm always a bit confused by the non-NMDA and NMDA case. In non-NMDA case, of course, the operational would not contain an unexpanded template in principle, except if you define it as a read-only in parallel. But that's my understanding. Now in NMDA, I'm a bit less sure, to be honest.
This has to be
in non-NMDA case. Is my understanding correct, guys? Correct me. Yeah. In a non-NMDA case, what you have as a config data node, you don't have it automatically as an operational data node. Is that correct?
In non-NMDA, you have running plus config false leaves. So if it's in running, then in non-NMDA, I think it has to, your get request returns you everything in running plus config false leaves. So you would get it by definition, I think. But the operation data store only is NMDA specific. So this issue just doesn't apply for non-NMDA.
Yeah, okay. So maybe it's good to clarify then indeed.
But is it so for both the intended and the operational data?
You're very
isn't this-
quiet. Can you speak up a bit, please?
Yeah, sorry, I'm connected from the smartphone. So for the intended and the operational data store, isn't it by definition that they have to be valid data trees? And so if we just return the templates, which is a partial information, by the will that be okay? Is it then going to uh, obey the rule that the intended and the operational data store must be valid data stores?
I think again you can get around that one because we're saying that. Sorry, could you mute for a moment, please?
Yeah, I hear an echo.
So Shia, can you mute, please? Thanks. So again, it all comes down to the semantics of what a template means. So we have a requirement today. I don't think it's going to stay true that running has to be a valid data store, and we're going to add templates into running. So effectively, I think what that means is when you add a template, as long as the template goes back to issue 3, as long as the template is syntactically valid, that might be enough to say that template is valid. And yet, when we actually, it doesn't mean it necessarily can be applied. And the same thing when you carry that template configuration through into intended, it might be that it was invalid in running, so it's still valid intended, and an operational doesn't need to be valid. That's not a requirement. So it could turn up in operational and still be there. So I think it depends here. I think that these, as I said before, I think that this is just a property of the solution, not a requirement. I don't think the requirement is it must be there or it must not be there. As far as I understand it, it's just like it might be better if it is or isn't there, but I'm not sure it fits into my head of a requirement. And I think that as we go through these requirements or consolidate them, we should be focusing on what is the core list, the minimum set of requirements that we must implement for any solution, and which other things are interesting things to evaluate solutions against. In my view.
Right. So as titled, this requirement is saying that the unexpanded template must be returned. And so vote no if you think that it may be returned, like if there's variability, or vote no if you absolutely think that it never should be returned. For all the ones that we have vote no's, really we should have a second or another call to go through them and do a show of hand of, do you vehemently oppose, or is it just not now? But we're not there just yet.
Can I would just ask something before we do the poll, for just we should understand? Would that sentence be true if we say for NMDA the operational data store returns config data nodes independently of templates? Just for me to clarify.
Already NMDA returns config data nodes.
All right. Okay.
That is what NMDA does.
Okay.
NMDA says that
All right.
every config true node can be returned,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
its value that's returned is not necessarily the configured value, it's the actual applied value or the operational value.
Okay.
That's
okay.
already the
Okay, I understand. So that's to say that we treat template config like any config data nodes.
Yes,
That's it.
and Robert, that's the crux of my issue or question here is what does it mean for a template to be applied? So if a template's applied, then does that mean that hence it is in operation because it is in effect, it has been applied, or is there some other semantics to say actually once you apply a template, it disappears from the configuration? In essence, once you get to intended and maybe operational. So that's the semantics that I think is interesting.
I'd say applying a template does not change its configuration. It just is what it was.
Yes, I can see that point of view, but I can also see the other one as well. I can see both sides.
Okay, right. Now, thank you for clarification.
All right, so we have a show of hand poll going on, and there's only 3, 4. Okay, here we go. This is good. We're finally getting the right amount of number. Okay. Oh, interesting. So one person definitely thinks that operational should return the unexpanded template. Okay. I'll close that show of hand poll and move to the next issue. Good one. All right, 18. So this is the issue I added since the last time, our first interim discussion on templates. I forget who it was. I think it was Jason made a comment about regex and the ability to have that. And, I didn't see it anywhere in the other requirements, so I added this requirement. Support regex in template config for template consumer application. And so specifically, enable a template to contain regex expressions so that its application will target a subset of the descendant nodes in a template consumer. Okay, that's kind of a loaded sentence. So here's an example. Assume you have instance data with interfaces like ETH0 and a whole bunch more, like all the way up to ETH19. And then also you have got GE0 and then all the way up to GE19. So you have a whole bunch of interfaces. And these are not templates. This is actual like config. But the goal is to be able to apply a template, right? But you want to be able to apply the template to subsets of those configurations. So maybe you want to be able to apply the template to those interfaces that begin with the string ETH, or end with a 0, or ends with a number between 3 and 7, or ends with 2 digits, right? So it's kind of like the ability for the template to contain some wildcards that, when it's being consumed, will only apply to a subset of the data. I hope that makes sense. I see that Jason added a comment a minute ago. Agree, we need some level of wildcarding, maybe more discussion on how we standardize. Okay. So do we want to talk about this? Any comments?
My only worry is the title. Like I agree we need some sort of way of selecting full lists or subsets of lists, maybe is a better way of saying it. I probably maybe not on this call to resolve, but we may want to just talk about how, do we want to require all implementations to do full regex? I'm not sure about that. Probably we want at least full wildcard and maybe some substring matching, but I'm not sure we want full regex.
No. Subset limited, maybe limited. No, not full regex, certainly not.
Yeah.
But some subset that we can agree, some very simple, like the examples I gave. And by the way, the examples I gave, I myself am using these in my own configuration on various devices I use. So this is very common to me. But yeah, right. I don't want to do full regex. That's a very complicated syntax. So limited.
I was just going to basically say, yeah, plus one to what Jason said. I agree with him. Is yes, we want to do something here. Maybe it's not full regex, but there's something that needs to be done here. But yeah, I think you said it better than I did.
Subset was not bad, actually.
Any other comments or discussion before we start the show of hand on this one? All right, let's do it. Okay, nice. It looks like we have unanimous agreement. that that we should support limited regex in the template config. Let's move to the next requirement, number 19.
Just a heads up, the next two are a pair.
Yeah.
Two slightly different cases.
And Jason, how about you you take the floor, okay?
Sure.
Like you can present these.
Okay. So there's a few precedence cases, and I think we already talked about earlier in issues that local config takes precedence. So I didn't open a separate issue for it, but I did open two issues, 19 and 20, for two different cases of precedence we need to talk about. So in number 19 that Kent is showing there, when we apply multiple templates, so here you can see apply template, we're applying the template called yellow, the template called red, and the template called blue. I'm proposing here that the yellow has the highest precedence, then red, then blue. We need a sort of rule for this, and I know this is a common rule in at least 3 major implementations.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think, for instance, at ordered list or something like that?
Yes, this is a user ordered list.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, sounds good to me.
And maybe before we vote, let's flip to 20 just briefly, because the two of these may kind of work together. So if you go to 20, so this is the one where templates have been applied at several ancestor nodes. So if you look at BAS, the container BAS, you can see in there we've applied template blue, but its parent container bar had template yellow applied, and its parent container foo had template red applied. In this case, similar to how kind of local config takes the highest precedence, here the innermost should take, the most specific should take the precedence. So in this case, the blue would take precedence, then yellow, then red.
Mm-hmm.
And just to clarify, Jason, when you say has the highest precedence, do you mean effectively is applied last? Is that what you mean?
Sure, yeah.
As in,
Yep.
it would override your any explicit config would have the highest precedence and override anything else. Then in this case, it'd be blue. Then anything in yellow.
Correct.
Then anything in red. Yeah.
And I think I tried to clarify that 19 by saying local config takes precedence over all templates.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
So in this example, we have some leaf Y being set to 55, but maybe we can imagine the template red sets it to 22, and template yellow sets it to 33, and template blue sets it to 44. But here its local config is being set to 55, so 55 is what applies. It's that has the absolute precedence. Otherwise, it would have defaulted to the blues 44, and if that wasn't there, then it would have been the yellows for 33, and if that wasn't there, it would have been reds 22. So that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and also with 19, basically it's the same idea of precedence, and I remember there was earlier issues, 1 or 2, but we were basically said precedence wasn't being that wasn't the object of the issue itself. It was needed to be discussed elsewhere. So this is where it's being discussed, and this makes perfect sense. This ordered list, yellow. So basically you're saying yellow. Basically, it's first apply blue, then apply red, and then apply yellows, where yellow would override any values that came from red and blue. So this is fine. Basically, what's first? Is it ordered like the first item in the list is having? Is it basically is it ascending or descending? Is what I'm trying to say.
We just need one way or the other, and this is the way many common implementations out there do it today. So might as well go that way.
Exactly. That's what I was about to say. One way or the other, and this is the way that's being done today. So why not? Okay.
This one I'm worried about. I'm worried about this as a requirement. So Jason, not to take away from the fact that if everyone's doing it the same way, obviously we should do it the same way that everyone's doing. That makes sense. But there may be some people who are doing it differently. I don't know. I agree there's a requirement to have precedence, and I agree we have to define it. But this one here feels like it's too tied to a solution as a requirement. as in that would only accept solutions that mandated that you had to do them on one line and had to be done this way. So I can imagine a solution where you could have apply templates as separate lines, and then it's not clear to me that the top one would have the highest priority or the bottom one would. I don't know. So I'm just not sure this one should be a requirement. 20 was fine with me. That seems obvious to me that's how the hierarchy has to be. This one is a choice, I think.
Maybe we could say that when multiple templates are applied to nodes, there must be a clear precedence rule, which template or rules which one.
No, we have to be more specific than that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Rob, in your case, if it's, I mean, we could just show in here that if it's like, so in netconf encoding, this would be 3 different lines, right? It'd be apply template yellow, apply template red, then apply template blue in XML encoding.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's the case you're worried about, I can just add it here to show in that if that's the way it's kind of described or encoded, that here's the order of precedence.
But is that so? So you're saying that any solution that didn't do that in that order would not be a valid solution? And then my question is why? Why is that a strict requirement?
I think because I think precedence rules are pretty key in allowing clients to have a common understanding of how templates are expanded.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, of course. And Robert made that point that we must have a precedence rule, and I agree with that. I'm just not saying this one. I don't see this as the requirement. The requirement isn't that it must be this, because it's not like if I had a requirement saying it had to be entirely compatible with a Cisco implementation, you would say, no, wait a minute, that's not appropriate. That's not valid. I'm not saying that. And I'm not saying whether we conform to this or not, I don't know. I'm just saying this isn't a requirement. There's no requirement that every solution must have this thing. It could equally be valid in that particular case that you applied in the other way or in the other order. And that's equally fine. So I'm not saying we should deliberately make it difficult for folks, but I don't see this as a requirement. Do you see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying, but I'm not sure you've convinced me, to be honest. I think this is one. I hear that there are sometimes things where we can maybe make it server decides and the market decides, but I'm worried this one would be kind of confusing if we standardize and allow different implementations to apply this in different orders.
Yes,
so I'm not convinced.
That's not what I'm suggesting. So I absolutely agree, which is what Robert said, is an order must be defined, but I'm not saying that it has to be this order. It's not.
Oh, I see.
It's not,
so maybe instead of first one, we say a precedence order must be defined.
I was proposing that this is the order. So Rob, are you saying that different vendors would advertise and say I'm first as highest precedence versus last as highest precedence, and you'd advertise which one your server does?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the standard should define a particular order. I'm just saying it shouldn't necessarily be this order. I think that I don't see that that's a requirement, or it's not a requirement I agree with. And it might be that everyone does it this way, and I don't know, but it just doesn't feel to me like it's a core requirement of any solution.
Would there be a solution to speak about ordered lists? Because that is a concept.
It is an ordered list. This is a leaf list, a user ordered leaf list.
Yeah. So why not telling it like that?
Well, we still have to say which one takes precedence in the user ordered leaf list. I mean, Rob, just as a data point, iOS XR does do it this way.
Yeah. So maybe.
So does Junos, so does Nokia. I didn't look at other implementations beside those, but. So maybe you're right. But I feel like we're maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's. I hear that maybe you're saying it's more fair to say there must be an order, and we can have more debate about the order. But I mean, we might as well put a stake in the ground. But.
I just wonder if it's taking the ground for requirements. If everyone does this, maybe it's fine. I just don't see this as a requirement. I'd like this requirement to be short. And for me, the requirement that actually that's here is that IETF should try and choose a solution that is close to what most existing implementations do, or something like that feels closer to what the actual requirement is you're asking for.
So what's important is that it must be defined, but it must be unambiguous whichever vendor is involved.
Yeah, I agree that all vendors have to do it the same way, and then that I agree with.
Yeah.
And if all the major vendors are doing it this way, then obviously it has to be this way. But I don't want to write it down as a
Hey,
requirement.
Kent, I'm not sure if that's the title Rob wants. I think he's saying that he's.
Oh, yeah.
Well, Rob, can you see the screen? I think what you're saying is we should not really be phrasing it that way. Is that
for me the best thing?
Got a little lost.
For me, I would say the best thing is when multiple templates apply to a node, a precedence order must be defined. And then in the comments or something, I would say along the lines of obviously choosing one that is compatible with majority of implementations is a sensible choice. I mean, or
well, that's what the title says right now, right? Precedence order must be defined to reflect common implementations.
But that again, it's hard. So if two other people come up with their own who don't participate so often in IETF come up and say, well, we've done it the other way around, then that's hard.
So maybe your previous wording's better, Kent, where you said a precedence order must be defined either ascending or descending.
It's actually standardized.
And I can update the text in there, say here's an example of one we could use, but others could be discussed.
Yeah, Jason, that would be good to say, here's one we can use, and by the way, it's known that these implementations follow this order. And that's fine. As in, I don't think we're going to end up with anything different here.
So, I mean, I'll just comment that I think as worded, this number 19 is the same as maybe it was issue number 2, where we said that wherever a template can be referenced, multiple templates can be referenced, and then it said a precedence order must be defined, right? So this one is basically saying the same thing. A precedence order must be defined. I think this is a duplicate of the previous, but I'm okay with going ahead and doing the show of hand polls even so.
I mean, Kent, but the primary focus number 2 wasn't this, so maybe number 2 could just refer to this one to say. I guess it is kind of duplicate.
Number two says that we may have several templates. It doesn't speak about the other precedents, I think. Does it?
I think it says in the comments or the description, the last paragraph says that outside the scope of this requirement would be the need to define a precedence order.
I have some sympathy with this 19 and 20 anyway. So if it is a redundant, it's not. Maybe it's not a big deal. I would be more concerned if there is a gap than redundancy. But okay.
So Rob Wilton, I suspect your opinion would also apply to 20, where I've proposed a specific order, but you'd probably prefer to say we got to just select some order. Or is this one more obvious that the inner should win?
For me, this one is obviously the inner one should win, as in that's the only semantics that makes sense. It just doesn't work the other way around.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree.
Good.
So this one I think genuinely is just clear and obvious.
Okay, so I've the show of hands been going for a little while. We got less votes this time than in other show of hands, but the votes that we got are unanimous. Oh, here we got a few more, and we're still unanimous. Oh, but now we're not unanimous. Oh, someone changed their vote. Very good. Now we're unanimous again. Excellent. So let's move on to next and last requirement. Number 20. And Jason, you've already introduced this. And we talked about it just now also. Should I just jump straight to the show of hands, or does anybody want to say some more about this first? We're jumping straight to the show of hands.
In the meanwhile, Ken, I just added the last one that we were talking about for the non-NMDA. That would be the last one, I guess. Maybe you need to refresh.
Sorry, is your comment related to issue number 20 or something else?
No, not this. The next, the requirement itself, 21.
21. Hold on, let me refresh.
Yeah.
Is there another one? Oh, there is another one. Okay, we have a new one. Excellent. All right, so for this one, unanimous. And actually, we got more voters than in other ones, so that's great. And now is the last one. And did you want to take the floor and introduce what this is about?
Yeah. So this is what we were discussing some time back for the non-NMDA deployments, where we want to show the expanded data as state data, meaning once it is applied, I mean, what is the actual value that is defined in the template, right?
Does it necessarily have to be state data, or because somebody else mentioned that some implementations today, they take the non-NMDA netconf RPCs like a get or maybe even get config, and just they've extended it with another parameter saying, return expanded. That would then return the expanded view from the non-NMDA running data store. I don't know if that's an option that would also resonate.
There could be different ways, but yeah, if we are talking about optimizing the memory footprint or something, I think it's better to have it as state data coming from the box, right? Not returning for each template consumer.
I'd be hesitant to require implementations to necessarily show this expanded in state.
But still, that's the only way you have today. Huh?
NMDA. Yeah.
So
I guess today without extending any RPCs, yes.
Yeah.
I'm struggling with this one, as in. I would rather the requirement here is the solution should also cater to non-NMDA deployments if it is not too complex to do so. That's what I would like the requirement to be. In terms of how that happens, again, I'm not sure it's a good idea to constrain solution space, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure this isn't like a tangential issue. So even if you were to do it in NMDA and non-NMDA, there's already a solution that takes an NMDA data model, and you can generate a separate state tree and return the separate data. So I'm not sure that would matter.
Yeah, the idea is that in the non-NMDA case, you have no intended. So whatever we told with intended does not exist in non-NMDA. So we have to find something
There
else.
should be some way of getting the data back. Yeah.
But the config true nodes in non-NMDA have to match the running configuration, because it's running config plus config full sleeves. So you can't avoid that, and the operational nodes will naturally represent the operational data in the system. So I think you would see you'd see running by default with the unexpanded template, and you'd see the operational data would be the applied effect on the system. And then if you wanted to see like the configuration post expansion, that would need to be another parameter, another RPC or another parameter to get
But hold
get
on.
config.
What do you mean by configuration post expansion? Post expansion always is never configuration. You don't store this in a persistent data store. The expansion is something you do dynamically in the server or in the device at least. And there you'd like to know what the device is doing, you as a client. That is
But whether you support NMDA or not, so for our system, definitely template expansion happens within the configuration subsystem. So like BGP doesn't know whether it's seeing templated configuration or not. It just sees the configuration after any templating has happened. So you basically take a configuration with templates, and then you generate a new configuration with all the templates expanded out, and which templates may or may not be there at that stage, and then you give all that stuff to all the daemons and things. So that's why I mean it happens in the configuration subsystem, and why I think it is still configuration data even after it's post expansion. So I guess another way of saying this is whether or not you have an MDA and it actually gives a name to that post expanded configuration, which is intended, it still logically exists in the system regardless.
Well, maybe taking a little step back, what I would find a pity is that the template solution that this would be standardized, it would be really a pity that it benefits only NMDA deployments, because I don't know how many percent, how much of the deployment will be NMDA and non-NMDA, but if many deployments are non-NMDA for whatever reason, good or bad, then I think it's really a pity that they could not benefit this template solution. So I don't know how to express this, but I think that's even more important to say how the expanded data is returned. But whatever the IETF would recommend as a template solution, it should not make it impossible to apply to a non-NMDA solution. That is.
And that's why I was suggesting that the requirement I would like to vote on is the solution should support non-NMDA clients or even non-NMDA servers, to be honest, if that is not too complex to do so. As in, if it made the solution twice as complex to support non-NMDA clients, then I don't think that would necessarily be the right answer. But I agree with you. It's definitely desirable if we have a solution that also would work for servers that are pre-NMDA.
All right, I understand what you say, but maybe then it could be a criteria to see whether it's a good solution or not. A good solution, hopefully, would be not adding twice the complexity when applied to a non-NMDA.
I agree.
So that is a reverse.
I mean, there's a couple parts to this, right, guys? Like, so the fact that templates can be configured and applied, that can kind of apply to non-NMDA non-NMDA servers, right? So then there's a second part, and that is, how do you retrieve a view of the expanded configuration? Can you and how do you retrieve a view of the expanded configuration? So these are two separate issues, slightly. For the first one, don't forget, a server is going to have to do a bunch of work to support these new templates, even if it's non-NMDA. It's going to have to implement a new RFC that does templates and expansion to get part one. So I'm not sure it's really all that, all that bad to say for a server to get number two, i.e. visibility, it may also need to do a bit of work. It doesn't necessarily have to support full NMDA, but maybe it has to support a new RPC or a new flag on the get config RPC that says return expanded config. Like, there's no free lunch here. An implementation has to do work to do number one. It's probably okay if it has to do a little bit of work for number two. I mean, it might be a lot of work to replicate all this in state, maybe even more work, to be honest, from an implementation point of view. If it's already doing number one in expansion, my guess is it's probably not a ton of extra work to support an RPC extension to return the expanded config. I think it's probably less work than trying to repeat all this in state somehow.
Yeah, I agree. So this one, I think you said it right, Jason. Like the how the templates are configured and apply is like the sort of the back end, and this is just a view. Like, what do the views that the clients get? If in MDA, they can do a get on intended. If not in MDA, they can do a get on running with a parameter to say, return to me the expanded. But in reality, the response that they would get back for those two different queries would be identical, right? So like, or all nearly identical. So
Let me maybe ask a question. The idea of the template, one of the driving ideas of template is to reduce the memory footprint so that you have less data to transfer from the client to the server, and for the server, less permanent data to store on the device. If you say, for instance, that we have a flag in the RPC to say that part of the running data store is the real well-known running config data store, and there is also a special part which is the expanded stuff, does it mean that it is persistently stored? Because then it defeats the purpose of template.
No, this was discussed earlier in the call. Definitely not. I'd say many implementations will not choose to store an expanded intended data store.
Okay,
they will produce it on demand as needed.
All right. Okay.
When someone does a get config or when someone does a commit.
Yeah. Okay, I agree with that. That should be the way. Yeah.
And so, and I agree with sort of what Ken's been saying and Jason's saying is that really is the name that IETF has given to seeing the configuration post expansion and post inactive configuration is called intended. So that's what the name is. So the question is, should we give an alternative name that for returning post expansion configuration rather than saying it's the intended data store? Is like that sounds more questionable as to why we want to have two different mechanisms. Rather than just supporting get data on intended. I guess there's more work to supporting NMDA, but
well, so here's another thing. An implementation doesn't necessarily have to support full NMDA. I know that would be desirable, but if an implementation just wants templates, they could just do the templates draft and only return intended. They don't necessarily have to support operational.
Yeah,
that's right.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that idea. I mean, as much as I would like to use some RFCs as forcing functions to get implementations to do in an MDA, it's like too heavy-handed to, do that. But I definitely agree that an implementation could implement intended without implementing an MDA operational, and that would be valid. Okay, so I think we can vote on this.
Jason, what was the sorry, Kent, what was the final text we're voting on?
Yep, let me bring it back to screen. Sorry about that. The solution enables non-MDA servers to return the expanded data. For instance, with the get config on running with a parameter, a new parameter to return the expanded data. So this is, I guess, to our previous point, not saying that we should force servers. Like, the other option would be we don't do this and we just say implement intended. Like, servers should do intended, and that's the only way. Okay, so
I was sorry. I was voting yes, thinking the answer to this one might be that we do intended.
Yeah,
without
me
doing
too.
full NMDA. So
yeah, me too.
I voted no because I had the same thought as well.
All right. Okay, let's fix this. Okay, let's do it again. That's not a good. Let's do it again. Okay, how do we do this? Solution enables non-server. Get config. Okay. All right. So as written, it is saying that you can do, okay, it's an EG, so let me fix the EG part of it. I don't want it to be an example. IE. Okay, so specifically, we're saying get config on running could be having a parameter to return the expanded. This is not saying whether or not the server implements intended, that, already we have a different requirement for that. Servers can do that. This is just saying whether or not the specification defines, like, essentially an augmentation to the netconf, RPC, a flag for returning the expanded.
Shouldn't we leave the details outside the requirements? I wonder. Just say that the solution enables non-MDA service to return the expanded data. And as long as we don't know what the solution would be, it's hard to say now that it must be that or that. So better delete the parentheses instead of having.
Okay, so, you're a little bit muffled and quiet. Can you try to get closer to your microphone?
Okay, sorry. Is it better now?
Yeah, say again.
Okay, so I wonder whether we could just not delete the parentheses and just say solution enables non-MDA servers to return the expanded data. And when we know what the solution is, then we can start thinking about how to do that. Because now we're jumping to a solution directly, I think.
Okay, I can do that. That makes it a little bit weaker, but I think unanimously agreeable. Like, everyone can agree to that, pretty much. Even a non-NMDA server could implement the intended data store, and that could be the solution. Okay, so let me do another show of hands, again, for the same requirement, but this time with the new title. With new title. Okay, good. So for everyone that voted, it was unanimous. I mean, the no opinions are not included, but that's good. Excellent. So we have now completed the review of all of the requirements that are in the issue tracker. So thank you, everybody, for that. There's 7 minutes left on the call, and I'd like to segue into the second half of the discussion related to next steps. Immediately, I'm thinking about IETF 122. I have already put a request for a presentation slot, 10 minutes, to at least, present to the working group the outcome of this effort. But beyond that, okay, and also if someone wishes to be the presenter, let me know. Otherwise, I can be the presenter. But beyond that, how do we move to putting together a draft? So there were 4 drafts that were, or proposals that were put forward. Is it too early to talk about this? Or, was one closer than the others and we could use that as a basis? Or, from an author's perspective, I definitely feel, everyone who's been contributing heavily here in these conversations should be author. But how do we move forward? What are your all thoughts about that?
I'm trying to think. So I'm not a big fan of requirements drafts that get published as RFCs, I think, and I'm worried that if we put all of these requirements in a requirements document, it could mislead us down a path. I think having something that summarizes the discussion and the key requirements that we've all agreed on, and maybe has the nuances for other texts, I don't know. But then it's sort of, I think, looking at solutions and evaluating them against what we've agreed here. I don't know yet whether there's one particular solution draft that's in place that's better than others. I don't know. I've not read them all recently.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. To be clear, I'm 100% with you. Let's not publish a requirements draft. I'm not a fan of that. I just simply want to do a presentation to the working group that is, here were all the requirements that were discussed. Here, the show of hands, and that's it. There's no, draft that's being published. The draft I'm speaking of is the actual RFC, the one that would be titled something like templates for Yang modeled data, right? So that's the RFC I'm referring to, the final RFC. And how do we start that? Like,
I think
a
the
coalition
next
of
step.
authors. Mhm.
I mean, I think the next step, Kent, is, as you say, I think that we've had quite a bit of discussion with a set of people here for many hours, and I think did a pretty decent job of pretty detailed requirements. So I think the next step is for someone to just jump into, I say someone, because I realistically, I'm probably not volunteering, but I can probably help. But is to just like write a stake in the ground draft that is in line with this. And there's going to be some sections that are TBD around the, the requirements where we need more discussion. But there's a lot that I think we've converged on.
Okay, good. All right. So yeah, also I'm not volunteering to write the draft. But okay, so how what do we do? I could send an email to the NetMod list saying so basically the minutes of this meeting, right? So I'll send the minutes of this meeting, the results of the show of hand, or a point or two, and then a sentence saying, if you would like to contribute to the authoring of the ID, please, unicast me, or something like that, or
Ken,
unicast the chairs, and then
Ken,
I'll bring you all together, and then the chairs, and then those authors can move forward with creating a draft. Yeah, please, Robert Wills.
Ken, I would be happy to write a stake in the ground draft based on these discussions.
Oh, okay, excellent, thank you. Right, so Robert Wills has put his hand, or threw his hat into the ring. So for anyone who wants to be an author, a co-author, send an email to Robert Wills and asking to be co-author on that. And excellent. So we're of course way past the ability. The ID submission cutoff deadline is in just a few days. There's no way, and I don't expect. Of course, if you can, it'd be amazing. But I mean, I'm not expecting. But for next time, we'll look forward to for 123. Hopefully, we'll have a solid draft already out there, and maybe even adopted.
Robert, you could count me in as well.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to help as well.
Excellent.
Nice. Okay, so we have a team. Excellent. So amazingly, we came in right on time. Thank you, everybody, for participating in this discussion, virtual interim. It was good to kind of go through everything and get people's thoughts and comments, and I appreciate that.
Thanks, Ken, for hosting and pushing this along. Appreciate your efforts to help move this along.
All right, bye all.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.